Welcome to If Ash Ran Disney, where we talk about what I would do at the studio and parks if I was in charge. Last summer, some online fan outlets reported the rumor that Disney Lucasfilm is planning a new Young Indiana Jones project. The rumor is based on an article on sci-fi-pulse.net, and unfortunately, it's just a what-if scenario. Right now, Disney has no official plans to reboot the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles or create a prequel trilogy. However, they need to. And if I ran Disney, this is how I would do it. First of all, Disney needs Indiana Jones. The character IP is iconic and lives rent-free in the minds of millions of fans worldwide. I want to stress the iconic part of this IP and what that means. Specifically, I want to stress the potential dollar value of iconic IP. Hang on a minute, you might be saying. Dial of Destiny tanked at the box office. And you would be correct. Also, you might bring up that Kingdom of the Crystal Skull was not the box office smash people were expecting, even though it turned a profit. Let's look at the numbers. Dial of Destiny cost $387 million to make and only brought in $384 million. That is only a 0.99 to 1 return to cost ratio. Or in other words, it lost money. Crystal Skull cost $185 million and made $786 million. That's a 4.25 to 1 profit to cost. That's actually a big win. That's interesting considering Crystal Skull has fans split on how good it was. Now let's roll back 20 years to Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. That movie made $474.2 million on a $48 million budget. That's nearly a 10 to 1 profit ratio. Temple of Doom was actually more profitable, costing $28 million and making $333 million. That's an 11.8 to 1 ratio. And finally, the big one. Raiders of the Lost Ark was made for just $20 million and made $389.9 million. That's a ratio of nearly 20 to 1. That is good business. Not to mention that Raiders is universally recognized as one of the greatest films ever made. That alone brings exceptional value to this IP. With the exception of Dial of Destiny, Indiana Jones has always been a solid moneymaker. Money goes in, then 4 times, 10 times, 20 times the money comes out. Disney is in financial trouble right now with rising costs of visiting the parks, which I will talk about in another video, and several disappointments at the box office as well as on their streaming service Disney+. The company needs a win, and our boy Indy is certainly up to the task. Hollywood Studios in Florida has the Indiana Jones stunt attraction, and a planned Indy attraction will replace Dinosaur in Animal Kingdom. Disneyland Paris has the Indiana Jones roller coaster, and Disneyland California has the Temple of the Forbidden Eye. These attractions are just as much in the consciousness of park visitors as the films are to movie fans. It would be a huge mistake to sit on this IP, or worse, replace Indy in the parks. The key is for these two divisions of Disney to work together. The first step to build the Indiana Jones brand is to get him back on the screen, silver and small. The first thing we need to talk about is when the story should take place. I would have it take place between the mid-late 1920s and the mid-1930s, basically up to 1935 and the events of Temple of Doom. The articles from the fan site suggested a 14-year-old Indy would be a good place to do a young Indiana Jones project. I disagree for 2 reasons. First, everything leading up to and after the First World War has already been covered by the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles. I see no reason to reboot or revisit this period of Indy's life. Second, Indy needs to be more mature than a young man in his early 20s. We need to see him as a world-worn, face-punching, whip-cracking man of confidence, even if it gets him in over his head, especially if it gets him in over his head. If the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles tells us how this character becomes Indiana Jones, then we need to see a film or a series with the real Indiana Jones we know. This is why I would set the story slightly later in his life, so we can give him time to grow into the character from the original trilogy. Therefore, the mid-late 20s to the mid-30s would be the best time period. But what about the other end, post-Second World War and beyond? I believe that making an Indiana Jones story after World War II was the greatest misstep of the franchise. Indy, as an older middle-aged man, is less of an issue than a much bigger problem, which is this. The world Indy lived in was swept away by the outcome of the Second World War. The old world, Indy's world, was one of mystique, uncharted jungles, cultures untouched by the West, a world where the sun never set on the British Empire. The period after World War II brought about global political upheaval. Countries under colonial rule received their independence. Virtually every nation had to choose between the West and the Soviets as the Cold War kicked off. We had split the atom and the world shifted into an atomic age and the new world of tomorrow. We made huge leaps in technology, including television. We saw the beginnings and rise of suburbia. Lastly, jet travel made the globe a much, much smaller place. We love Indy's adventures because they take place in a world we ourselves do not live in. In other words, the world before the war was just more romantic, which makes it a much better choice. The late 20s to the mid-30s makes Indy mature enough to be the hero we need him to be, and early enough to happen before the world is transformed by the Second World War. Let's talk casting. Harrison Ford will always be Indiana Jones the same way Sean Connery will always be James Bond. But it's time to recast. I believe keeping Harrison Ford as Indy was the reason the last two movies took place after World War II. The actor was just too old to play pre-war Indy. I would cast Solo star Alden Ehrenreich. Star Wars fans seem to be split on if Solo was a good movie or not. I liked it, and I think Alden was a perfect casting choice. I also liked him in Hail Caesar, where he played a classic Hollywood Western star. Alden has the comedic timing, the swagger, and he's the right age to play Indy in the right time period. Since he's already played a young Han Solo, he would also bring a subtle continuity to the franchise by taking on two of Harrison's former roles. If I'm running Disney, then we need more Indiana Jones in the parks, and that means rides and merch. Dinosaur is getting replaced in Animal Kingdom with an Indy attraction, and I'm worried it will be a re-theme of the Temple of the Forbidden Eye because it shares the exact ride layout as Dinosaur. For now, I'm going to let that one be and turn my attention over to Hollywood Studios. There's already an Indiana Jones corner of the park with the stunt show and the Adventure Outpost gift shop. This is all fine, and the only thing I would change is adding new merch for our new show and film. Now let's scoot over to the other side of the park where we find Tower of Terror and Rock and Roller Coaster. Aerosmith has been irrelevant for a very long time, and right now the plan is to re-theme the ride with the Muppets. However, I'm going to use this space for an Indiana Jones attraction. The way I see it, we have two options. We can tear out the old ride entirely, or re-theme the track system that is already there. Re-theming is obviously the less expensive and will take less time. Let's look at the re-theme option first. I want to make it an Indiana Jones coaster, and I want to make it an Egyptian ruin. I want full-size Anubis statues holding up the sign outside, and huge stone hieroglyphs on the side of the show building. The queue would take riders through the map room and the Well of Souls, then board minecarts that would launch them through a tomb. The minecart chase from Temple of Doom was actually written for Raiders, but it was cut from the script before it was filmed. So, re-theme Rock and Roller Coaster as the Indiana Jones Tanis dig site. Now the tear out option. I have two thoughts on this. The first is a minecart train with a brand new layout and track system that is still themed with the Tanis dig site. It would be an inside-outside experience with the thrill level similar to Expedition Everest. The track would snake around the ruins with lots of ancient Egyptian iconography. The second tear-out option would be to put in an Indiana Jones trackless dark ride in the vein of Mystic Manor at Disneyland Hong Kong. This would tell a more linear story, as riders would move from scene to scene on an original adventure. The trackless system would also give riders close calls and perceived peril. Whatever the ride system is, a new attraction would need to have a higher capacity for the crowds at Hollywood Studios. Replacing Rock and Roller Coaster would also work thematically with this area of the Hollywood Studios. The Hollywood Tower Hotel was supposed to be built in the 1930s, and the fateful events took place in 1939. This is right on the money for the Indiana Jones timeline. Thematically, this also fits more broadly with the whole Sunset Boulevard section of the park, being both set in the same time period and representing classic film. I get the vibe that Indiana Jones really belongs in Hollywood studios. Raiders was basically a love letter to the Saturday matinee serial Spielberg and Lucas grew up with. It's a celebration of the movies as much as the rest of the park. In the end, Indiana Jones is a potential goldmine for Disney. However, it's essential that the IP is managed properly so we don't have a repeat of Star Wars. If Disney wants more IP in the parks, then it needs to start with quality IP. I think reboot is the wrong approach to Indiana Jones. He is a serial character with virtually limitless stories to tell. Continuation is a better approach. Above all else, Indiana Jones should never be reimagined. That's what I would do if I ran Disney.